The gathered Delvers broke camp quickly the next morning, which dawned gray and cold, unlike the previous pleasant weather. Hiddock nodded his furry head in the direction they had to go, further up the valley and above the ridge, to the cave where he had found an entrance. A gateway into the depths could prove hard or even impossible to find, but Hiddock had spent the time and the effort to seek this portal into darkness, and that was partly why these Delvers followed him. It had been a dangerous search, with many setbacks, ever since the last known entrance had disappeared, but the Catshi was not full enough to expect it to be easy. He suspected that several of his companions that had joined the raid did not understand this yet. So Hiddock mused to himself as he silently led the way up the steep track. Yorvold followed closely behind, pushing upward on his stone-infused legs. He did not mind the climb, as it was natural for him. Indeed, he was looking forward to the cave that Hiddock had mentioned over the fire last night. It would be good to get out of this fall air and into a place that felt a little more like home, whatever terrors might lie in the depths. One by one the others followed. The slight Lucropan Dani bounded lightly up the trail, repeating his promises to himself from the day before. The odd-looking human Zedric followed cautiously behind, while chatting with the gliding Sacrifisto, and the tall, powerful Jotnar brought up the rear of the Delvers, looming over them all with her wide grin. Once they had climbed for nearly an hour, Hiddock waved them all to stop. The track had narrowed, and he clung to the rocky side of the mountain with his claws. "Hold for a moment. I will check for dangers ahead and behind." The rest of the Delvers paused, watching him, or glancing down at the valley that now lay far below. They were not nervous, not for anything that lay outside the mysterious place of legendary horror that they were heading for. Hiddock would have preferred not to have anyone looking when he did this, but at the moment it couldn't be helped on the narrow trail. As before, he went into his meditations and sought safety of opening, gently tearing the veil. He searched for signs of activity or sources of pain in the veil, but found only one. It was coming from the cave that he knew lay above. Pulling away and closing the opening he had created, Hiddock nodded to his companions once more. "We are almost there, and it seems we are alone. For now. Be ready, Delvers. We will soon come to the door." When they reached the cave, they found it dusty and disused. There was no sign of who might have hollowed it out or carved the only path that reached this lonely place. Something about the air was foul and filled with the dust kicked up by their entrance. Along the far wall of the cave, there was a smooth space like a wide stone step or a low altar, flanked by a pair of grinning statues. Even in the gloom, Sacrifisto could see that there was something off about the appearance of the statues. It looked like the sculpture had drawn from the images of individuals that had been maimed by terrible torture, then healed. He hid it well, but even as a banshee, the healer was unnerved. It was like a perversion of his art made into solid form. Between the statues, there was a tremendous door, rising from floor to ceiling of the cave. Dust and shadow made it difficult to see, but the door was heavily carved with shapes and images that could not quite be discerned at first, until the Delvers moved closer. Then it became much easier as the eyes of the things carved in the door began to light up, one by one, in time with the footsteps of the Delvers that brought them closer. Like the statues, the carvings on the door appeared ordinary at first. simply scenes of daily life covering a broad variation of races and creatures. However, every creature character depicted on the door wore a smile that was too wide, even as they walked into situations that were about to turn deadly. Pits of spikes, hangman's nooses, or a freakish slaughterhouse full of knives. Even as they stepped into death, the face-stretching grin never left the face of any creature, even animals that could not normally make such an expression. The cavern lit up with the strange glow of the eyes as these many creatures carved into the mighty stone and metal door. It was an eerie sight, the mad joy on the faces of the creatures that were shown there. Their eyes focused their light on certain parts of the chamber, making Yorvold's axe shine with their weird light. There was something hypnotic about the images. The glowing eyes seemed to shift under the viewer's gaze and made it hard to look away without feeling dizzy. Hiddick watched the faces of the Delvers that had followed him here. He was looking for any alarming signs, for his life might well lie in the hands of these folks. The Jotnar woman stood staring over the heads of the others, her jaw set firmly as though she were wondering if she could smash down this eerie door. Hiddick saw no danger there. Little Donnie was smiling wryly, a gleam in his eye as though the more frightening the obstacle, the greater the reward that must lie beyond. Hiddick would have to do his best to keep that one from running off on his own. Zedric and Sacrifisto were enigmatic, impossible to read, while Yorvold, for his part, had turned from the door in defiance and was examining the stonework of the statue. Odd work this, the Vergers muttered through his beard. This was not done with the tools I know. Oh well, I'm no craftsman anyhow. Wish I had some nice mushroom beer to toast up good luck. Hiddick decided that Yorvold would probably be alright for the most part. The cat she scratched his furry face and cleared his throat. No one reacted. He tried again. Still, everyone was absorbed in the weird, almost beautiful, yet subtly disturbing images before them. Finally, Hiddick resorted to smashing his blade against a nearby stone. Everyone jumped. "What?" cried Zedric, spinning and calling power to his fingertips. Crimson flames licked up his wrists and arms, flooding the cavern with heat. Hiddick took a step back from his fellow realm mate. After a moment, Zedric dismissed the flames, leaving the smell of charcoal behind in the dry air. "Oh, I'm sorry, friend. I was examining the strange door and thinking of what lies beyond it. Never fear. I shall save my power for my enemies, not allies." Hiddick nodded in response, but his ear twitched. This flame warden would be one to watch. Very well. Let us then test our mettle. I have come this way before, and have solved the riddle of this dark place for now. Sacrifisto stepped forward, eyeing the cat sheik quizzically. "What do you mean?" With a silent, swift flick of his wrist, Hiddick pulled out a small knife, plain but sharp-looking on its curved edge. Like so many sources of power in this world, entering the depths by this door requires a sacrifice. Suiting action to his words, he sliced open the pad on his palm and allowed the blood to pool between his fingers, then pour onto the flat stone in front of the door, lit by the glowing eyes. Hiddick passed the knife to Donnie, who took it with barely any hesitation. The little man chose the side of his wrist instead of his delicate hands, letting the blood flow. One by one, they each cut into their hands or arm, allowing blood to trickle from the wound. Where the crimson droplets fell, dust rose from the stone, twisting and writhing like living smoke. A rumble came from the door as the smoke rose before it, and a metallic smell flooded the cave. The lights flickered, the carvings on the door blinked, sending a cascade of rippling glitter through the dust that had risen. Then the doors flew open, pulled inward with great force. A sucking wind roared, pulling the delvers into the darkness beyond the doors. Tumbling and crashing, shouts lost in the howl of the wind, they were thrown helplessly through, and the door slammed shut behind them like powerful jaws. The faces of the carvings on the door seemed to laugh, though no one was there to see them in the empty cavern. Their brightly glowing eyes winked out one by one. Large and small delvers were equally helpless in the torrent of wind that pummeled them through the dark. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the tornado stopped. They fell down some stairs, banging painfully on the edges. It was a narrow tunnel, plunging steeply downward. The nimble Donnie was first on his feet. Ow! Well, here we are. We have entered the depths. Time to find some treasure. The others were far less lively, muttering and rubbing bruises on their as they dragged themselves to their feet, though there was an odd, pale glow that came from the steps themselves. Zedric sparked a fire and lit a torch that he produced from his pack. So they had light and were able to examine where they had ended up so painfully. Outside, it had been a cold, wet day that looked toward the coming winter. And here, it was strangely warm and uncomfortable, despite the wind that still tickled their heels from time to time, constantly reversing direction. Behind them, there was darkness. Where they had come from, ahead, the staircase plunged down, past where their eyes could reach. The stairs themselves were bone white, luminescent even in the light of Zedric's torch. Perhaps it was the flickering flames, but the stairs seemed to bend and shift in a disturbing ripple motion. The walls were a crimson color, like the blood the Delvers had just spilled to enter. Hiddock pointed one claw from his dark cloak to the small scratches that lined the uneven walls. Those were made by others who came before. His voice echoed down the hollow tunnel and plunged into the darkness like an open throat. No one answered, but it might have been because they were quickly binding their wounds and preparing to move on. "I'll take the lead for the moment," said Yorvald at last. "Never let it be said that a Verger who drinks first was loath to walk first." The Jotnar snorted. Any of the Viking realm would say the same, but I shall take the position of true danger, as I did on the trail coming up here. She stepped to the rear of the group and pushed her heavy helmet over her head. The gleaming hammer that she raised was massive. Sacrifisto shook his head, wondering if these two would bicker the entire time. Ever since last night, when one of the Vikings had challenged the other to an eating or drinking contest, he couldn't remember which, the two fighters had been at odds to see who could best the other in a physical contest. To the Banshee, the question of the depth's nature was far more pressing. Yorvald grunted, then set off down the airy stairs, his hand hovering close to his axe. He was followed closely by the others, their dusty boots muddying the pristine white of the steps. Occasionally, Hiddick reached out and marked the wall with a knife point, adding to the silent tally of delvers that had come this way. It felt almost like a duty to him, a record of the lives risked in the depths. The stairs went down and down, gradually flaring out in organic shapes. They looked just like vertebrae that went on forever. It wasn't until they came to some muddy blueprints that Yorvold realized that it was going on forever. He let out a curse and held up his stone-encrusted hand for a halt. These blueprints. Hell's bells, we've been here before. Hiddick craned his neck around the wide verger and took a look for himself. Yes, I see. Those are our footprints indeed. I'd recognize your heavy tread anywhere. Cedric let out an annoyed snort, sending a spiral of flame from one nostril. These stairs are looping back on one another somehow. Strong magics. The banshee hovered at his elbow. That, or something subtle, something we aren't noticing. Ah, you sound like my granddad, Dottie snorted, slipping between them. If you're going to chat and puzzle over this all year, we'll look as old as he is before you're done. I have a feeling there are far worse things waiting for us further on. I say, let's go and find them. Donnie's way. And with that, he jumped far and high, right off the steep steps and into empty space. Gasps went up from the group as the small figure went sailing down into the blackness, his red hair streaming behind him. As he disappeared, there came thunderous swallowing noises, and the walls of the stairwell rippled. A wind came up like a satisfied sigh, stinking of hot metal. The other companions looked at one another. Cedric snapped his fingers, sending a shower of white sparks down the stairs after the Lucropan, but the light never revealed any sign of him. Sacrifisto muttered, "So this place is swallowing us. It truly is alive." "Hell preserve us," Yorvold muttered as he hefted his axe and stepped down a few stairs. He glanced over his shoulder to the rest. The Jotnar at the rear grinned back at him. "Well, shorties, are you going to let the little one with the long fingers outdo us all? Clearly we must venture deeper into this strange place if we are to find what we're looking for." Hup! She pushed her way to the front of the line and bent deeply at the knees. "Just a moment. Let us go in an orderly." Cautious Hiddick tried to stop her, but there was simply no way he could. Straightening with a rush, the Jotnar woman flew into the air, a mighty leap into the unknown. The darkness closed around them as the rest of the Delvers followed. As if in a strange dream, they found the walls closing in as they accelerated, slick with some sort of fluid, slowing and controlling their fall. The walls shifted as they continued on, and the pale, luminescent material of the stairs disappeared. Instead, the floor became endless mechanical pipes threaded like glistening metal intestines, but covered in smooth glass. They were swallowed, squeezed down by the thrumming pipe that moved in its transparent surface like flesh. Whenever it touched their bodies, it rippled as if in ecstatic pleasure. Cedric's torch went out, and the only light came from the grinning faces that appeared behind the rippling glass walls, watching. They flashed by as the Delvers fell deeper and deeper, down and down into the depths. This wasn't so bad. Not so bad a start at all, for the depths. Hiddick thought as he plunged downward. Certainly a less violent beginning than the last raid he had been part of. However, a fear gripped him. This tunnel they slid down would be impossible to climb back up. Once they each had what they came for, whether glory or treasure, secrets or something else, how were they going to leave? As if sensing that Hiddick had begun to realize his plight, the glowing faces that were flashing by appeared to laugh, watching him wriggle and squirm. And so they all fell toward the great gullet, one of the most dangerous locations they could have started, in this place of legendary horror. Though the Delvers did not know it, far down below there were abominations already filling their approach, quivering in bizarre anticipation. They began glowing faces to match the Delvers that were approaching. Familiar skin stretched over misshapen bodies. There, in the darkness, mouths devoured one another in endless cycles of eternal hunger, their excitement growing.